All right, I'm going to start with a single working object and show you how to convert that into multiple working animated objects in this movie. So first things first, let's just change my title from a floating single object to a floating multiple objects. All right, first let's just review how this animation works. So I've got a box object with an X, a Y, a draw, and a move method. And then if I look at my animation code, it calls a do updates, which runs box.move, and then it also calls box.draw, and of course it erases the screen. So back to my box object, it has a draw, which draws it in terms of its X and Y, and it has a move, which moves the X and the Y. So in order to change from one object to many objects, I'm going to have to, instead of storing a single X and Y, I'm going to have to store many X's and Y's. All right, in order to do that, first I'm just going to go ahead and change the name from box to boxes, or actually better yet, box manager. This will be the single object that moves all the boxes. That's why I'm thinking of it as like this object is in charge of the boxes. And the draw will draw all the boxes and the move will move all the boxes. The object will then have a boxes property, which will be a list. So lists are started and ended with square brackets. And X and Y are no longer meaningful because there's going to be many X's and Y's for many boxes. So what the list is simply a list of objects. That's what the squiggles mean, which themselves just have X and Y coordinates. So right now I've just converted this into a list with a single box. Of course, it stopped drawing because my code doesn't expect to see boxes. I haven't yet updated the rest of my code. And anytime I'm going to work with a list, I like to just at least have 2 items instead of 1 so that I can see that I'm doing something with each item. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my single X, Y coordinates, and I'm going to put these tidily on one line just so that it's easy to copy a bunch of them. And I'm going to go ahead and create more than one. You separate each item with a comma. So I'm missing a comma there on my second line. Let me get these tidied up. I'll go ahead and add that comma. And I'll go ahead and change these coordinate values so that I'm going to have 3 boxes with 3 different coordinates. Okay. Now at this point, instead of having a single box with an XY, I have a box manager which has many boxes, each of which have their own X and Y. I don't expect my code to work yet because everything is still referring to the old box. I haven't updated it yet. All right. Now I'm going to go to my draw method next, and I'm going to go ahead and change it so that instead of drawing this X and this Y, which is to say this box is X, which is no longer meaningful, it's going to loop through my list of boxes. So I'm going to say this boxes, that's that list of boxes, and I'm going to use the for each method. For each takes a function, and we're going to use an arrow function in this case, which itself takes a single argument, which is the box. So basically we're going to call a function with each box. So I like to just do this with the box in parentheses, then a little arrow, and then I can lay out another block with the squiggle brackets. So now this code that's inside of, starting at line 13 here, this code is going to run once for every box that I have. And I can just take the code down from line 16 and 17 and cut it and paste it. I used Command X and Command V. And instead of this X, it's now going to be box X, which is going to be a different box each time that little arrow function runs. So it's going to run once for each box. So at this point, I'm going to be drawing every box in my list. And if I update my animate code below to actually call this draw function, I should see 3 boxes appear. Let's see there. There it is. Box becomes box manager draw. And in do updates, I'm going to want to change box to box manager move. Okay. That should clear up that box is not defined error. And there now I see my 3 boxes appearing exactly as I expect them to. And if I were to add a new box to my list, I will see a 4th box appear. So this is quite handy now. All I have to do to add a new box is just add a new X and Y. And boom, I get a new box. Or if I remove one disappears. So that's a very simple setup. and a very common way to handle a list of objects in a game. All right, there is my box manager. So now the boxes aren't moving because I've only updated the draw function. The move function is currently going to be throwing an error. So instead of this.x changing, I'm once again going to point to this.boxes. I'm going to run my for each. I'm going to use an arrow function inside. I'm going to use the singular box to point out that this next block of code runs once with each box. And I'm going to take all of this code below, and I'm just going to be changing the word this to the word box throughout. So I'm going to just, what I did is I cut box, and now I'm just pasting box in each of these. And then I'm going to have to move this whole block of code up inside of my for each callback. So that for each arrow function is called once for each box. So if I have 20 boxes, that code runs 20 times. And sure enough, now my boxes all move. You'll notice they all move by the same logic, so they all have the same function. That's why I made a manager class. If every single object in your game had totally different logic, you'd make maybe different objects for each of them. But if you have just sort of a list of things that all work the same way, it's a little more efficient to just store an X and a Y for all of them. And again, it's very easy now to add as many X's and Y's as you would like. And as you add more X's and Y's, more items get created or get destroyed. We can also add convenient methods like add box, which will add to a list. So that's just taking this.boxes, and we're going to use the method push, which adds to an array in JavaScript. Sorry, array is another word for a list, or the more technically correct word. I'm going to use a little shorthand here where I use X and Y inside of squiggles without the colons, and that just means that the value of X is whatever X was handed to us, and the value of Y is whatever Y was handed to us. This is a very convenient shorthand for adding an XY. Now my box manager has a new capability, and let's go ahead and make it so that when we click on the canvas, that new capability is used. So I'm going to go ahead and add an event listener to the canvas. I'm going to listen for the click event. And my callback function, when I get an event, I'm going to call box manager add box. And now for the X, I'm going to use events offset X, which is the X position of the click. Let me type it correctly. And I'll use event offset Y, which is the Y position of the click. All right, and now I can go ahead and click anywhere. And as I click, I create new boxes. So what's happening is that list is getting longer and longer. In practice, you would need to be cautious with any sort of code like this that keeps adding to a game. You have the potential for what's called a memory leak. Remember that this boxes, that code is getting longer and longer each time you add to add a new box. So in practice, you'd want to make sure that your games had some way of destroying objects or reusing them once you get too many of them. Otherwise, like, let's imagine that your character is throwing something, and each time they throw them, you add to a list. You'll have the game taking up more and more memory as the game goes on, and it will slow down. Or worse yet, if you had your game automatically add an object every second and somebody leaves their computer open for a day, they now have the computer churning through all kinds of calculations. So you would want to be careful with an add box method like this to also have some check on how long it is. All right.